So good evening to you all. Thank you for being here. My name is Rafael Vasquez Guzman, and we're going to try and answer some of your questions, address some of your concerns. We know that some of you are dealing with a lot of anxiety, a lot of what's going to happen now that Donald Trump will be president of this country. What's going to happen now that Congress is going to be run by the Republicans? And where I want to start this conversation is by saying, remember that we went through some of this in 2016, right? And so it is very normal to be feeling the way that you are feeling. We want to make sure that you know that we understand your worries. We want to make sure that you know that it's okay to feel this way. For those of you living in Sonoma County, we are already working on multiple pieces, and I will create a video tomorrow to address some of these things. So again, we want to make sure that you all will get the latest information as it comes up. But the first thing that I want to say before our attorney shows up in a couple of minutes is this, and that is for those of you who are feeling the way that you are feeling, again, these are valid feelings, especially if you have family member who is undocumented or who are already sharing this fear of what's going to happen. Are we going to get deported? All of this stuff. And so the first thing I want to say is please make sure that your families do not do what many families did in 2001, in 2003, in 2006. And that was that many families said, you know what? Things are getting worse. Eventually, they are going to deport us. So we're just going to pack it up and we are going to deport ourselves. Please talk to your families and make sure that they don't do that because doing that made it impossible for a lot of people to get DACA. So a lot of people who self-deported in 2004, 2005, 2006, then they contacted us from Mexico and they said, you know what? I am not, I'm trying to get um, DACA. Is it possible if we show up tomorrow, if we are show up in a week, to get status? Other families, I remember, reach out to us and said, listen, we left in 2001 because of the things that were happening with this country. And then we came back, right, in 2007, but it was in July or August. Can we still qualify for DACA? And the answer obviously was no. So please make sure that I understand that your families may be feeling anxious and fearful and everything else. But again, there is no purpose, there is no reason why we should self deport. And the attorney just messaged me that she's coming in about 2 or 3 minutes at the latest, and then she'll take over for most of the questions. I'll ask the questions, and then she'll answer. But the other piece that it's important. So for mental health concerns, I already talked to Humanidad Therapy and Education Services in Sonoma County, and we are going to host at least two rounds of conversations, convivencias, we call them. And so if you call 707 525 1515, 707 525 1515, what we're going to do is in November and in December, we are going to be offering convivencias, which is where you all go into a room with the therapist. And what we offer there is an opportunity for you all to just process your feelings and emotions and everything else. So we want to make sure that you know that. Again, we recognize everybody's in shock. Everybody, many people in my classes and other places said, I never thought this was going to happen again. But here we are. So we invite you to, again, use the resources, and that is that you should contact Humanidad Therapy and Education Services and just say, listen,
Okay, thank
I'm
you.
feeling uncomfortable, I'm feeling in shock or anything. And what we want is for you to, again, process those feelings with our therapists who are well trained and will offer this type of service for free. At this moment, we're only going to do group conversations. And I spoke with our executive director about 10 minutes ago, and she has agreed to do two for sure, one in November and one in December. So, because we don't have the specific dates and times, we're going to invite you. I'll say the number one more time: 707 525 1515 in Sonoma County and surrounding counties. You would have to come in. We do them in person only. And just say, I am interested in the next convivencia, or Rafael told me to contact you about the next convivencia, and they will put you on a list and then they'll contact you with that information. You can start doing that tonight to make sure that you have that. And then the other piece that we know that there is a concern, and then again, the attorney is already here, and I'll start asking her questions in a second. But the other thing that is a concern for people is if we're going to get deported, what happens with our children? Or our parents are wondering about that. So I already sent an email. If you may remember, maybe you don't remember, maybe you never had to do this, but in 2016, right after this person was elected to the White House in 2016, we organized multiple events for child custody. This is where you do paperwork, legal paperwork that guarantees or gives permission, temporary permission for somebody to take supervision, custody of your child. So maybe your parents are asking, maybe other people in the community are asking. We already sent the email requesting support from our colleagues at Sonoma County Legal Aid Foundation. And the way we've done it in the past, one time we did it at Santa Rosa Junior College in 2016, and we ended up with like 125 families. And then the second one, when it was like close to 100, and what it is we provide childcare in one room because children, especially young children, shouldn't have to deal with hearing about mom answering questions about deportation or custody or any of that stuff. So we bring our colleagues from Líderes del Futuro Avanzando board, and they provide childcare in a room adjacent to where we're doing the paperwork. And then the parents come in and sign all the paperwork. We do not keep the paperwork. We just give it back to you, but then you put it in a safe space. And in that situation, if anything should ever happen, you would just communicate with the person who has agreed to keep custody, which should be a person with status, and that individual can then go to Sonoma County Legal Aid Foundation. They will file the paperwork typically for free, and then that's it. That person can make sure to take your child to the doctor, to school, any other stuff, including that if for whatever reason you needed to stay in your home country for a longer period of time, they could legally take your child outside of the country. And so, again, all of that is explained so that you get to choose what type of rights you are providing to this person to take care of your child. So as soon as we have that set up in the next couple of weeks, we'll have an update and we'll share that information with all of y'all, possibly through a flyer so that people can sign up and come to our event. We, as always, have to rent space, so we're going to ask for donations, and then we can do it maybe at Santa Rosa High School or Pioneer High School or whatever else we can do it. Okay, so those are the two basics that I wanted to cover, and now I'm going to welcome our good colleague, friend, attorney Ashley Byers, who has made the time to be here. Ashley, thank you for taking the time. One of the first questions, so I asked people to send us questions ahead of time. And one of the questions is, what will happen to DACA? And the second part to that is, if DACA comes to an end, what would be the time frame for that process? And whatever you can educate us on this.
Well, can you hear me? I'm
Yes.
driving, so I apologize for it sounding kind of weird, and I apologize for not being on video, but as I'm driving, but thank you for having me. And first, I just want to say, to the community, there are so many advocates who are ready to step up like there were in 2016. We are grieving with you, but we are ready to stand with you and to protect you. As it pertains to DACA, what I'll say is that I have worked under the Obama administration, the Trump administration, now the Biden administration, and now preparing for a second Trump administration. Now, under the first Trump administration, he attempted to end DACA with just the use of his pen, right? He tried to end it without any sort of formal notice and comment, which ultimately led to the demise of his intent to end the program before the Supreme Court. Now, there's been a lot published, there's this whole Project 2025. There are a lot of pundits out there saying that, on day one, he's going to end it. But the reality is that we don't know exactly how or when he intends on ending it. I think it's very safe to assume that he will attempt to end DACA again. And, I don't say this to scare anyone. This is just based on observation and our experiences from the first Trump administration. This time around, I think that he will try to end it in a much more quote unquote legal process, meaning it will be any sort of ending to the program will probably be upheld by the Supreme Court, but it won't happen overnight. With that said, I would encourage you to renew your DACA as soon as possible if you are within the renewal period. Even if you are applying for a green card based on marriage, for example, I would still recommend that you renew your DACA as soon as possible, because in the event that your green card is denied or it takes a long time to approve, having that DACA protection until it expires will provide a level of security to you and your family. I wish I could give more concrete examples and more concrete, advice, but I think the basics, what it comes down to right now is just making sure your DACA is updated and renewed, you have your work permits, and, it won't happen overnight.
Thank you for that. There's another question here from the questions that were asked previously. And again, for those of you who are here in the conversation, if you want to put your questions, we're not going to ask you to unmute yourself because we are recording this because we want to distribute it later on as an audio only. Please put your questions in the chat and then I'll ask the attorney. But another question somebody asked was, this is not a DACA question, but I'm wondering for my students who have gotten paperwork for asylum, what resources, like applied for asylum, what resources do they have to know how their cases may be affected?
Yeah, so currently under the Biden administration, and right, we are under the Biden administration until January. Right now, anyone who is not a recent arrival, so let's say someone who has been here in the country for several years and they've only just applied for asylum, and assuming that they are not from Afghanistan, those cases are not priorities. What that means is that the asylum office will likely not schedule you for an interview anytime soon. However, if you are a recent arrival and you've applied for asylum, your case might be considered a priority, and you should be prepared to attend an interview before the asylum office, shortly. But with that said, I would make sure that you have your alien registration number and your receipt number from USCIS so that you can check your case status. So there are two agencies that work to adjudicate asylum applications, one being the Executive Office for Immigration Review, which is under the Department of Justice, as well as the Department of Homeland Security. with the sub-agency being USCIS. Now, if you've applied for asylum before USCIS, again, make sure you have your receipt number as well as your alien registration number. You can go onto the USCIS website, plug in your receipt number, see what the status of your case is, meaning you can see if, a receipt has been issued, if you have been scheduled for an interview, stuff like that. And if you are before immigration, the Executive Office for Immigration Review, Immigration Court, you'll need your A number, your alien registration number, and you can plug that into the website to see if you have any upcoming hearings. It's very important that you attend all hearings, whether it be before USCIS or EOIR, because the adjudicator before Immigration Court can order you removed from the country, and a failure to attend any interview before USCIS can lead to your referral to Immigration Court. Now, in terms of other benefits for asylum seekers, all asylum seekers under the federal regulations have the right to apply for a work permit 150 days after applying for asylum. So 150 days after the date in which immigration received your asylum application. Right now, asylum seekers can apply for public benefits, and especially here in California, all individuals can apply for Medi-Cal benefits, including if you are undocumented. However, I think it's safe to assume that under a second Trump administration, the strict enforcement of the public charge rules will come back into effect. And generally speaking, the public charge rules don't apply to asylum seekers and people who are applying for humanitarian benefits like asylum or the U visa, but we really don't know how the administration is going to enforce those going forward. But for now, I would still say that you are okay to apply for those public benefits.
Thank you. If my brother is a citizen, can he petition for me, or will that not have protection for any reason if the program ended? DACA.
So when I get this question, it's my answer is always yes, but. So yes, absolutely. U.S. citizens can petition a non-citizen brother or sister or sibling, but the issue is whether or not a visa is available at that time. What I mean by that is anyone who is not an immediate relative of a U.S. citizen, meaning a spouse, parent, or child under 21 who's unmarried, everyone else falls into preference categories, meaning they need to see if a visa is available. Right now, brothers and sisters of U.S. citizens, that's category F4. And right now it's about 23 years until a visa is available. So the sibling can certainly file that petition, but whether or not the non-citizen will be able to obtain benefits is a larger question of timing, meaning whether or not they'd have to wait, decades before a visa becomes available. So it provides some indicia of protection, but really at this point, I think we can say that there's something like 245I is not going to come back. So I don't really think, in my opinion, I don't think it provides that much protection.
Okay, thank you. Question, could people who have gotten asylum get it canceled?
Yes, certainly. People who have been granted asylum can have their asylum taken away. However, here in the Ninth Circuit, that's pretty hard to do. And the only reason, well, there are several different reasons why asylum can be, withdrawn, but it's largely for, if an individual has committed some sort of very serious fraud or like a very serious crime. And in order to have it taken away, there needs to be some sort of formal process.
Okay. If DACA, let me see here, would DACA recipients be safe if Trump reinstates the Alien Enemies Act of 1798?
I mean, to be honest, this is like a footnote from law school. It's not something that we as immigration attorneys deal with on a regular basis. I know that there's references to it in Project 2025. And given the state of the Supreme Court at this point, I think that they would take an originalist view of interpreting that act. But I think it would be a pretty far-fetched argument.
Thank you. I applied for advanced parole. If approved, is it still safe to travel outside of the country in December or January?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? You cut out.
Yeah, I applied for advanced parole. If I was approved, is it still safe to travel outside of the country in December or January of 2025?
Yes, yes. I travel before he gets sworn into office.
Okay, thank you. What would happen to those who have submitted an application for residency through a spouse? Will they be affected if they're still waiting for the results or outcome of their application?
Um, I mean, no. So I think it would be extremely difficult to change the Immigration and Nationality Act. So under Immigration and Nationality Act, Section 245, that's the provision that allows for adjustment of status. I think that those processes, again, it would be difficult for him to do anything. It would take an act of Congress. And while both houses are projected to be controlled by the Republicans, I really don't think that there's the appetite to change those rules right now. So I think having a pending application is still okay. And assuming there's no serious inadmissibility issue, as well as any sort of like very serious public charge issue, I think those applications are still fine to submit.
Thank you. Another question. So we had, as our organization Líderes del Futuro Avanzando, we had a plan to travel to Mexico in March. At this moment, the question here is what will happen to that trip and is in mid-air until, Trump makes it into office and then goes from there. But somebody else asked here, what documents should we have ready in case something happens where they want to start any type of deportation?
Yeah. So in terms of the advanced parole trip, still apply. As I said, it's not going to be overnight that he ends DACA. At least that's my opinion as an immigration attorney. Because if memory serves me correctly, he didn't move to end DACA until like mid to late 2017. If I remember correctly, I think it was September 2017 the first time. So it was several months into the first year of his term. So I think it's safe to say that, I would certainly apply for advanced parole now. It's taking about 4 to 5 months to get approved. And assuming they don't withdraw the document, I think you would still be fine to travel, because advanced parole is still a tool that applicants can apply for, meaning applicants for adjustment of status. Even asylum applicants can apply for advanced parole. So I think it would still be okay to apply, and assuming they don't revoke the document, I think it'd be okay to travel. But again, always confer with an immigration attorney. Now, in terms of having documentation ready to go in the event of any sort of ICE, detention. So just to let everyone know, I've placed an order for red cards. These are cards produced by the Immigrant Legal Resource Center out of San Francisco, and they have a detailed description of your rights as a non-citizen and a little script that you can repeat to ICE in the event that they try to detain you. Rafael should be receiving those in the next couple of weeks, so you can please feel free to get one. So I would have that. Make sure to have all of your documents updated. I know, for example, right now the Mexican consulate is very backed up with appointments, but make sure you have recent or current identity documents. But also, it's really important to remember that in the event that ICE tries to detain you, they need a warrant. They do need a warrant. And a lot of times they don't have it, or they say they have it, and they really don't. So ask to see a warrant. And if they don't have it, you do not let them in.
Thank you. And that's another piece that I forgot to mention. Thank you for bringing that up. We are going to restart the trainings on know your rights with immigration and know your rights with the police. We have done those in the past. We have some videos that may be a little bit too old now, but we are Líderes del Futuro Avanzando, Mecha de SRJC. We're going to restart those trainings soon so that people know what the rights are, and either we'll make videos or we'll do in-person type of trainings. So the next question here is, if we apply for a U visa, how would this affect or process having Trump in the White House?
What I'll say is that under his first administration, I really didn't see a change in the application process. That was largely the same. Perhaps we might see more resistance from law enforcement agencies with signing law enforcement certifications. I didn't really have that experience during his first administration. I think maybe we'll see an even further increase in processing times, which would be horrible because right now it's already taking at least 10 years to get a decision. And again, it would be very difficult to eliminate the U visa program. It's codified at 101A15U under the Immigration and Nationality Act, and is codified under the Violence Against Women Act, which was already reauthorized in 2022. So if for some reason it doesn't become reauthorized under the Trump administration, it could be affected in that way. But I think generally speaking, people should continue to seek out the benefits that they are eligible for, because it's just that they are eligible for it. They have the right to request these benefits. And remember, there are immigration attorneys and advocates ready to defend your rights as an applicant, because even it doesn't matter if you're a citizen or not, you have rights and you have the right to defend yourself in court.
Thank you. Once he takes office and I am a DACA recipient, should I be concerned about traveling within the country?
I would certainly take precaution. Right now, up until he takes office, you're fine to travel with just your work permit, because work permits are compliant under the Real ID Act. Going forward, you should certainly get your Real ID license from the state, because starting in May of 2025, domestic travel will require that Real ID compliant ID. However, if he does in fact end DACA, then it will be, infinitely more difficult to get that Real ID license, because, if you don't have a work permit, you won't be able to get your Real ID. You would just be able to get an AB60 license. So I would take very, extensive precautions while traveling domestically. Because the reality is that even if you're traveling domestically, you still have to go through TSA, which is, a federal agency. So they could refer you to Customs and Border Protection.
Thank you for that. If given the luxury through your job as a DACA worker now, should you apply for a work visa through your employer?
I would certainly approach HR and ask if that's a possibility. The work visa process is more involved than like a family-based petition, because it does require labor certification, meaning the employer needs to do all these publications. They need to solicit applications from legal permanent residents, other, citizens, and then if they are unable to fill it, then the labor certification can be approved. So I would definitely approach HR, see if that's something that they would be willing to sponsor, and then from there consult with an immigration attorney.
Okay, thank you. Yes, so the question is, for the Real ID, does the work permit help?
Yeah, that is a document that you can submit to the DMV in order to get your Real ID.
Thank you. Do you have any idea how much money would an attorney cost me if I need one?
No. because every office is different. What I will say is, generally speaking, here in the state of California, if an attorney is asking for fees larger than $1,000, they do need to put that money into a trust account, which is basically an account that the bank has, and it safeguards your money. And the attorney cannot solicit those funds until work has been done. I'll say, just from my personal experience at the firm that I currently work at, we charge by the hour, and it depends on the case.
Definitely. And again, while I wait for a couple more questions, please put your questions here. My sister joined the Marines. Would she be able to fix my status?
I have never had a sibling based parole in place. It's really only for immediate relatives.
Okay. Thank you. And again, please put your questions in the chat for our attorney. Just a reminder that, again, we understand there's a lot of anxiety, there's a lot of worry. And what we want is, and what we wanted tonight was to bring our wonderful volunteer attorney, Ashley Byers, to answer questions, because we want to make sure that, again, we're able to be ready rather than start thinking that you know the answers. We'd rather ask Ashley for those answers. But at the same time, again, we recognize that your mental health may be affected, your family may be, mental health may be affected by the recent elections. And so, again, if you are in Sonoma County, Humanidad Therapy and Education Services will have multiple workshops on mental health to teach you some of the skills, or therapists will teach you skills on how to cope through these difficult transitions. 707-525-1515, 707-525-1515. And then the other question here is, just to clarify, for those of us who applied for the March trip, there could still be a possibility for the trip to happen.
Yeah, I think so. And before I forget, going back to the question about the parole, the military parole in place, I will confirm that. I think the answer is still no, but I'll confirm it, and I'll text Rafa. But in terms of the March trip, I think for now, continue, as planned. I understand that in the event that it can't go forward, you will lose that money, and that is obviously unfortunate. But I think right now you should plan on going, because, as I said last time, under the first Trump administration, it was still several months before he took any action on DACA.
Yeah. Okay.
And you should certainly use that tool of advanced parole while it's still available, because, assuming you are otherwise eligible, it can open up so many options for you.
Definitely. Yeah. And again, we have spoken about that, the benefit of advanced parole, where, even if DACA was to disappear, you still enter legally this country using advanced parole. So there's that. And again, there's another question that was asked. Just want to clarify, if your DACA is going to expire within the next 180 days, it is time to renew. If you're in Sonoma County and require assistance, I'm going to be doing DACA renewal paperwork this Sunday, starting at 3 p.m. by appointment. So email me, as always, and we'll get you in the office. And so again, that's the thing. Within 6 months. And in regards to how long it's taking, it's different. I've had somebody who gets their DACA renew within 3 weeks, and it's been like that since 2014. And then there are some of you that, 6 months later still hasn't been renewed. So please make sure to keep that in mind. And then a question here, if Trump was to start deportations, how would it take place? I know that this has come up multiple times in the questionnaire that I asked people to submit earlier. Some people's concern is, because we are DACA, he already knows who we are and where we live and everything else. Do you have any information on that one?
Um, I don't have any, like, what I will say from my experience is that the reality is that the agency, meaning Homeland Security and then the sub-agency ICE, they really don't have the resources to conduct any sort of mass, quote unquote, mass deportation at one time.
Mhm.
Okay. Um, him him using this rhetoric is really just to scare people. And he it's done the job, and it's awful and it's horrible. And every time I hear him talk about it, it makes me even more upset. But that being said, again, the reality is that um, the agency really just doesn't have the resources to do that. What I will say, under his first administration, in my experience when I was doing detained work, a lot of times people came to the attention of ICE through different sort of operations, meaning that they were looking for specific people. So, like, for example, I had someone who the FBI was looking for, but that's because they had information that he had been involved in very serious issues. So that's one example. And remember, here in California, there are only certain crimes that jails and police departments can report to ICE. I think a criminal attorney can certainly speak more to that, but under the Truth Act, there are only certain crimes that they can report to ICE. Whether or not the local police department, like, for example, I'm here in Oakland, whether or not, like, for example, the Oakland Police Department would report to ICE, is another question, because, they don't always follow the law. So, with that being said, I think just the general takeaway is that it would be very difficult to conduct some sort of mass operation. And I think the people that they are first going to focus on are those with very serious criminal records.
And again, as a reminder, we're going to do trainings on Know Your Rights so that you know what to ask for should they ever come to your door. For example, we had somebody in Hillsburg a few years back where we had gone through the training. They had gone through the training, and all they did was pick up the phone and they called me and they said, immigration is at the door. What should we do? And we just went over it. And in that situation, it was because immigration was coming to verify that his sister and her partner were actually living at that address. It was 6 in the morning on a Sunday. But again, being prepared eases a lot of the anxiety. So please keep that in mind. When we offer those trainings, please show up, because it's all about being more comfortable and not living in fear, which reminds me to remind you that again, don't self-deport. If your parents are saying, let's pack it up and let's go, again, that's not a solution. You have been living here for many years. You pay your taxes, and this too will pass. So I know that there's a lot of anxiety, but again, please don't make hasty decisions that may have long-term consequences. It does mean, again, that you should be careful in regards to drinking and driving, marijuana possession, any of that stuff. Even though marijuana is legal in California, it is illegal in the country. So don't go to marijuana shops. Don't buy any of that stuff. It's just what our attorneys have advised us for a long, long time. Now, question here. Let me see here. If you have the permanent bar but did advance parole this year, does that legal entry eliminate your other illegal entries?
Unfortunately, not. It does not eliminate the permanent bar. Going back to what you said, you know, I agree. Don't make any hasty decisions. This is your home. Consult with an immigration attorney, see if there's a way in which you can obtain permanent status. And yeah, please avoid stuff like going to dispensaries. I had a client last week who we had to cancel his consular interview because he admitted to using gummies. And he thought it was okay because it is legal here in California, but it is unfortunately illegal at the federal level. And I think that we can anticipate that to continue despite the efforts of the Biden administration to deschedule it to, I think, a Schedule 3 controlled substance, which, still means it's controlled, but it would carry lesser consequences. So please be careful when being faced with, a decision of whether or not to engage in that behavior.
Thank you. A couple of other questions came up. This is not a DACA related question, but if somebody's green card expire and they are waiting for their citizenship approval, whether or not it's going to be approved or not, are there steps this individual needs to take in order to be ready on that?
So generally well, here in San Francisco, the San Francisco field office, they're a little bit more flexible with applying for naturalization while having an expired green card. What I like to do is just renew it, get the receipt, which will serve as what's called an I-551, which is proof of residency while that renewal is pending, and then apply for citizenship. That's what I like to do because it provides the client with, confirmation of the residency status. It will give them the ability to travel while their naturalization is pending, and then, they won't have any problems when they go in for their interview.
Thank you. Next question. I was granted advanced parole. I did it. I am married to a U.S. citizen, but my significant other is not wanting to help me apply for residency to adjust my status. I have mentioned it to my significant other as to the possible consequences with the new administration. Is there anything else that I can do? My parents, none of my parents, siblings are U.S. citizens, and my children are too young.
What I would advise you to do is consult with an immigration attorney, because they might want to screen you for protection under the Violence Against Women Act. It's not just for women, it's for all individuals. And, I'm not making any sort of judgment call or, anything like that. But, if this person is withholding things from you, that might be enough to apply for protection.
Again, that's where you would, again, talk to an attorney to get more details in a private setting and then get that advice. Thank you.
What before I forget, we've been hearing a lot about people who either watch an attorney on TikTok or Instagram saying like you can apply for your green card without having to leave the United States, and it turns out they're saying to people to apply for adjustment of status under the Violence Against Women Act, and uh, they're basically telling people to lie about the mistreatment or abuse that they've suffered at the hands of a spouse, for example. Please do not do that. Do not make up a story in order to get benefits. The most important thing you can do with immigration is tell the truth. So if you are going through something and you're going through a hard time at home that would rise to the level of abuse, you might qualify for VAWA. Otherwise, do not apply for it if you don't qualify.
Thank you. Next question. If DACA ends, would our job be terminated immediately?
I would say that it would end when your work authorization ends. They're not going, they it would be hard for them to revoke the work authorization immediately. So I would say that your job would end when your work authorization ends.
Thank you. Do we know where the DACA information is kept, and would they ever consider targeting specifically DACA recipients for deportation?
So USCIS maintains all of that information, and within the executive order, it is laid out that that the agency will not use that against an individual to start removal proceedings. However, if it is ended, I think it's safe to assume that they could use that information to go after people. But again, remember, ICE does not have the resources to detain each and every person who may otherwise be removable from the United States. I think that's also a concern that we have with the Keeping Families Together program. If any of you have heard of that, it's basically a parole in place program for spouses of U.S. citizens and stepchildren of U.S. citizens. I have many clients who have applied. The program is currently enjoined. We're waiting for a decision out of the court from Texas. But like DACA, we don't know if that information is going to be used in the future. However, most of these people have already applied for stuff like a 601A waiver of unlawful presence. So their immigration already has their information. And they wouldn't apply if they weren't otherwise eligible. So, we really just don't know.
Thank you. A couple of more questions here. One is, I want to buy a house, but since we don't know the outcome of DACA or the future of DACA, how would that affect me if I buy a house?
It would only affect you in the sense that if you're using a social security number that belongs to a US citizen, they could come after you, whether that be, the IRS or whoever. But buying a house for immigration purposes, I think it might be a good thing. It definitely goes towards showing good moral character, showing that you're contributing to your community. But in terms of immigration, the biggest thing that I can think of is like if you're using a social security number that belongs to someone else, that could be a big problem.
Okay. And then this is the second question. It says, I get IHSS for my kids, and if DACA ends, would they take that away from us?
So the children are the ones who are receiving the benefit. So no, I think that's fine.
Okay, thank you. And again, let's take a couple more questions here so that we can finish by the end of the hour, which means about 9 minutes from now. While you put any additional questions in the chat, I just wanted to remind you again that we are working already to always be ready. And that means that we have reached out to our colleagues here in Sonoma County at the Sonoma County Legal Aid Foundation so that we can do paperwork locally in case you have children and you're concerned and you just want to have your legal paperwork ready to allow somebody that you trust to have temporary custody of your children should you ever be taken into custody. So we will have more information as soon as we have that agreement with them. It could be in November, it could be in December, depending how busy they are. But we wanted to make sure again, Líderes del Futuro Avanzando, Mecha de SRJC have always been doing this work, and we will continue to do this work. And so while you may feel like you're just going through this on your own, please note that there are many people here that understand your concerns. And as the attorney, Ashley Bayer, said, there is a lot of people who are willing to support you. A couple more questions here. My job only asked me one time for my work permit, then they haven't. If DACA ends, what could happen? Could I continue to work as is?
No, you as an attorney, I cannot advise anyone to work without authorization. You should only work if you have valid authorization. That's all the only advice I can provide for that.
Thank you. And then, is there anything that can help remove a permanent bar?
Unfortunately, returning to your home country for 10 years or more, that's the only way to eliminate it.
Okay. And then if someone doesn't have DACA, but they were brought to the US by their parents when they were 5, but they are now married to a US citizen and the paperwork is paused, is there something they can do at this moment?
Uh, I'm not sure what is meant by on pause. Um,
I'm assuming
Generally
is the
speaking, go ahead.
yeah, I'm assuming is the program that you mentioned where they apply for
Oh,
parole in
keeping
place.
families together.
Yeah,
Yeah, so the 601A waiver is definitely still an option. It was certainly utilized a lot under the Trump administration. It is something that is codified under the Immigration and Nationality Act. So again, it would be very hard to end that benefit for non-citizen spouses. So even if keeping families together ultimately does not go forward, you can definitely still consular process with a waiver of unlawful presence.
thank you. If my daughter is a citizen and I have DACA, should I do a letter to leave her with a citizen? Again, that is for that person who asked that question. Again, we'll do the paperwork in the near future. It's not a letter, but there's going to be our colleagues from Legal Aid Foundation will hopefully support us once again, as they did in 2016, to do all the paperwork. So we'll communicate that to you all. So does the person need to be a US citizen or can they be residents only in order to have temporary custody? And the answer that we have gotten from our colleagues is that residents can do it. It's just the idea that, again, somebody who would not be at risk of being deported is what we have been told by Sonoma County Legal Aid Foundation, is somebody who should have custody paperwork for your child. Is there any disparity in that, attorney?
Yeah, no, I mean, I would agree. Yeah, unfortunately, lawful permanent residents are still subject to removal if they become deportable from the United States. So I think it's safest to, pick someone who has citizenship. Otherwise, residents should be fine. But yeah.
Okay, thank you. Um, I am a DACA recipient, and so are my 2 other siblings. Myself and my brother are going to renew this month, but my sister would have to submit her paperwork for renewal in March. Will she be able to renew?
We don't know. We don't know. If by March, he still hasn't made an announcement, I would go ahead and renew.
Yeah. Okay. And I just got my work permit through the visa U or the U visa. Can I still renew my DACA?
Yeah, you can. You know, I always pose that question to clients, right? Like if I have a client who has been granted deferred action through the U visa, but also is a DACA recipient, I pose it to them, right? They're the ones who are going to make the decision. The thing with the deferred action for the U visa is that it's good for 4 years. And then after those 4 years, if you still haven't been granted full U visa status, you can just renew it. So that might save a little bit of money, if you don't want to renew DACA. But, you know, it's your decision to make. If for some reason the client, if I feel kind of 50-50 as to whether or not their U might get approved or not, I might suggest to them, yeah, maybe, you want to consider renewing your DACA. Otherwise, I think you can feel reasonably safe having your deferred action under the U visa.
Thank you. Okay, I don't see any other. Okay, if a path to citizenship comes up for DACA, let's say that Congress and the president decides to do that, would the permanent bar not allow them to become residents or citizens?
Um, Generally speaking, that's correct. But if there's some sort of like provision within the, the bill or the act that says that's no longer an issue, then you can adjust without a problem.
Okay. Thank you. So again, we have taken an hour of your time, and I know that some of you in 20 minutes, in an hour, tomorrow, you'll have additional questions. Again, you have that link. You can continue to submit questions. We'll try to get you some additional answers. But for now, we want to be respectful of our wonderful attorney's time. Thank you, Ashley, for taking the time and being here. Thank you for answering all these questions late at night. I think you have eased some anxiety from people, and we look forward to, again, we're thinking about possibly doing another group consultation in person in December, but it's something that we are planning for now.